Today we're talking about Miro. Picture a conference room in Perm, Russia in 2011. A creative agency is on a call with a client halfway across the world. The agency's founder is trying to explain a visual concept, something that would take 30 seconds to sketch on a physical whiteboard. But there is no whiteboard here. There's a static PDF, a jittery screen share, and a growing sense that something essential is getting lost in translation. That founder was Andrei Kusid. And that small, recurring frustration would eventually become a company worth over $17 billion. This is not a story about a lucky pandemic windfall. It's a story about patience, timing, and a marketing decision so deliberate it would reshape an entire industry's vocabulary. It's the story of how a whiteboard became a platform and how a category got created almost on purpose. Let's rewind to the beginning. Part 1. The Infinite Canvas. In 2011, Andrei Kusid and his co-founder Oleg Shardin built a tool called Real-Time Board. It was simple, it was browser-based, and it solved one specific problem. How do you replicate the feeling of a physical whiteboard when your team isn't in the same room? At the time, almost nobody was asking for this. Most teams in 2011 believed email, chat, and conference rooms were collaboration enough. Real-Time Board spent nearly 8 years building for a market that didn't yet know it had a problem. That's a long runway. And it's worth pausing on because most startups don't survive 8 years of quiet, disciplined refinement without a breakout moment. But 2 product decisions made during that period would end up mattering more than any single feature update. The first was the Infinite Canvas. While competitors built page-based tools with fixed boundaries, Miro let users zoom out to see an entire project ecosystem or zoom in to a single sticky note. This wasn't just a design flourish, it was a strategic bet on stickiness. Once a team's entire project, from user journeys to roadmaps to retrospectives, lived on one continuous board, leaving became almost unthinkable. The switching cost wasn't built by a contract, it was built by gravity. The second decision was less visible but just as important. Miro's engineers invested early in high-scale real-time synchronization. At a time when most collaboration tools strained under a handful of simultaneous users, Miro built for far larger groups. It looked like overkill in 2015. It looked like prophecy by March of 2020. That's the first lesson in this story. Build for the market that might exist. Miro wasn't reacting to remote work. It was ready for it, years in advance, because it had already done the unglamorous infrastructure work nobody was asking for yet. Part 2. The rebrand that changed the business. By 2018, the product was strong. The brand was not. Real-Time Board was a literal name. It described a feature, not a vision. It said digital whiteboard for designers, when the company's ambitions had grown far beyond that. Kusid and his team came to a conclusion that a lot of founders resist. Sometimes the thing holding back growth isn't the product. It's the story you're telling about it. They needed what marketers call a love mark. A brand that inspires emotional commitment, not just functional adoption. In 2019, Real-Time Board became Miro, a name inspired by the painter Joan Miro, whose work was defined by bold, playful shapes and color. The message embedded in that name was clear. This was no longer a digital board. This was the joy of creation. But the rebrand wasn't just cosmetic. It was the delivery mechanism for something much bigger, a category creation strategy. Here's the thinking. If you compete to be the best online whiteboard, you're fighting in a category with low search volume and even lower budget priority. Nobody puts whiteboard software on their strategic roadmap. It's a nice to have. It's a line item that gets cut in a budget review. So Miro's marketing team, working with analysts at firms like Gartner and G2, set out to define an entirely new category, visual collaboration. That distinction matters enormously. A tool is optional. A category is a budget priority. By renaming the space instead of just the product, Miro positioned itself not as a vendor competing for scraps, but as the leader of a problem that didn't have a name yet. Then came early 2020. The world was suddenly forced into remote collaboration overnight, and Miro wasn't scrambling to explain what it was. It had already spent a year telling the market exactly what visual collaboration meant and why Miro owned that space. That's category creation as a marketing power move. Don't fight for share of an existing category. Rename the fight. Part 3. The product that marketed itself. Here's where Miro's story gets especially interesting, because the growth engine that took it from millions of users to tens of millions wasn't built primarily on advertising spend. It was built inside the product. Miro's team recognized something simple but important. A blank canvas is intimidating. Faced with empty space, most users freeze. So Miro built the Miroverse, a community-driven template marketplace where consultants, agencies, and power users could share their own workflows. Sprint retrospectives, customer journey maps, complex system diagrams. From a marketing standpoint, this was quietly brilliant. Each template functioned as its own landing page, capturing highly specific search traffic. People weren't typing whiteboarding tools into Google. They were searching how to run a remote brainstorm or product roadmap template. Miro's templates met them exactly at that point of need and pulled them directly into the product. Those community-generated templates ended up driving a significant share of Miro's organic traffic. Think about what that means. The user base itself became a content engine. The product had become the marketing channel. And it didn't stop there. Because Miro is inherently collaborative, every single user who invited a teammate onto a board was, functionally, doing unpaid marketing. That's a multiplayer loop. Miro didn't need to rent attention through advertising because it was earning attention simply through usage. Every board shared was a tiny act of evangelism. This is the second big lesson. Community is the deepest moat a company can build. Features get copied. Interfaces get cloned. A thriving community, full of creators who've invested their own time and expertise into your platform, cannot be replicated just by shipping a competing feature. Part 4. Winning the enterprise without losing the grassroots. As Miro scaled, leadership ran into a classic tension that defines product-led growth companies. How do you win massive enterprise contracts without destroying the very grassroots, bottom-up energy that made the product beloved in the first place? Miro's answer was what you might call an iceberg strategy. Above the waterline, the experience stayed frictionless. Any individual, any small team, could sign up for the free version and start collaborating in minutes. No procurement process, no sales call, no friction. Below the waterline, something much more sophisticated was happening. Miro built a product-led sales engine that didn't rely on cold outreach. Instead, it watched for hand-raisers, teams inside large organizations that were already using the free product without any formal company-wide agreement. Marketing tracked engagement data to identify these product-qualified accounts. When a critical mass of employees at a single company showed strong, sustained usage, that's when sales stepped in. But notice the framing of that conversation. It wasn't, "Let us show you why you should try this." It was, "Your teams are already using this extensively. Let's make it official, with enterprise-grade security, admin controls, and consolidated billing." That's a fundamentally different sales motion. You're not persuading anyone to adopt something new. You're formalizing something that's already true. And it let Miro land the overwhelming majority of the largest companies in the United States, with remarkably low traditional acquisition costs. This connects to another core principle in Miro's growth story. Solve for the user, not just the buyer. Most enterprise software companies sell upward, to the CIO, the person who signs the check. Miro won the room from the bottom up. It won the product manager, the designer, the individual contributor who actually opened the tool every day. Those users became internal champions, and they pulled the eventual buyer toward the purchase rather than the other way around. Part 5. Reinvention. Before the market forces. No growth story is a straight line, and Miro's had real trade-offs along the way. Early on, the company had to rebuild its entire architecture, moving off Flash and onto HTML5. That transition was messy and expensive. It wasn't optional. It was survival. More recently, Miro has faced a different kind of threat: commoditization. As basic whiteboarding functionality got bundled for free into products from giants like Microsoft, the core feature that once defined Miro started becoming table stakes rather than a differentiator. So the company did what it had already done once before. It reinvented its own identity, this time repositioning from a single-use whiteboarding tool into what it now calls an innovation workspace. Much of that evolution leans on artificial intelligence, but not in the shallow bolt on a chatbot sense. Miro's ambition is for AI to function as a genuine teammate, one that can synthesize workshop notes, cluster scattered ideas into themes, and draft execution plans automatically, compressing the distance between a rough discovery session and a concrete deliverable. Internally, Kusit has pushed a philosophy he calls day one thinking. The question the team asks itself, deliberately and uncomfortably, is this: if we were founding this company today, knowing everything we know now, how would we build it? That question is a hedge against the single biggest threat to any successful company: the legacy trap, the tendency to keep defending what already works long after the market has moved on. Closing, the lessons. So what does Miro's journey actually teach us about growth? First, solve for the user, not just the buyer. Internal champions, not procurement departments, are what actually drive adoption. Second, category creation is one of the most powerful moves available in marketing. Renaming the fight, from whiteboarding to visual collaboration, took Miro from a nice-to-have utility to a mission-critical platform almost overnight. Third, community is the deepest, most durable moat a company can build. Features can be cloned. An ecosystem of creators cannot. And fourth, build for the market that might exist, not just the one in front of you. Miro's early bets on infinite canvas design and large-scale real-time synchronization looked like over-engineering for years, until suddenly they looked like foresight. Miro's real strength was never a single viral moment. It was momentum, gathered slowly, like a sphere picking up speed and mass as it rolled through successive chapters. From internal agency tool to remote work necessity to AI-powered innovation hub, the lesson for any company chasing durable growth is this: a great product alone isn't enough. You need a product designed to market itself, a brand willing to define its own category, and leadership willing to reinvent the company before the market forces the issue. This was the marketing behind rapid growth. See you in the next episode.